Shalom, giving all praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachahakodash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders at Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations, as always, to the elect. And I wanted to do a response to the video uploaded by the elder Require Kwam of the GMS London branch, and also get into a few things in prophecy as we see our enemy doing exactly what the prophet said he would do, which is tapping back into his pseudoscience, all right, his pride, all right, as he is tired of hiding and feeling sorry about who he really is and how America was established and what he's done throughout the four corners of the earth, which prophetically we're living in a time where he's being called out for these very different things, right? How America was, got through the massacre, all right, of the Northern Kingdom who were over here, right? The tribe of Gad, Ephraim, Issachar, Zebulon and so forth, that was over here in the Northwestern Hemisphere, all right, scattered throughout North, Central, South America, all right? We know that Esau came over here, all right, and he found out that there were resources over here, okay, and he got permission from the queen to come back with the sword, okay, along with a Hebrew interpreter, bringing white Jesus, okay, and this is the brutal history of Christianity over here, all right, in the Americas, and what was spread throughout the four corners of the earth. It was spread by the sword, and it forwarded so-called white supremacy, which again, when you look at these so-called Christian nationalists, they're not into the scriptures. They're into dominating over people and having power over the nations, all right, and ethnically cleansing lands, okay? Colonization, it never stopped, okay? America has been used by the elite bankers as a hammer to go throughout the four corners of the earth, all right? With the great, alliance with them, okay? The different nations, the EU and NATO, all right, with these nations, ultimately Babylon the Great and the Small Hat have been able to just have their way. See? And we're living at a time again where they're being called out for these various different things, as the scriptures tell you in the book of Habakkuk, okay? Habakkuk chapter 2 and 12, woe to him that buildeth the town with blood and established a city by iniquity, okay? Ultimately, the scriptures, verse 10, thou hast consulted shame to thy house by cutting off many people and hast sinned against thy soul, okay? Verse 15, woe to him that giveth his neighbor drink. They literally did that to the so-called Native Americans. That puttest thy bottle to him and makest him drunken also, that thou mayest look on their nakedness. Thou art filled with shame for glory. Drink thou also, and let thy foreskin be uncovered. The cup of Yahweh's right hand shall be turned unto thee, and shameful spewing shall be on thy glory. So as he's being called out, as there is an intense inquisition going on, according to his works, he's being investigated, cross-examined. This is his response, as we've been showing you their response, all right, in response to the elders' video. They're doubling down, but shame will come. What are they doubling down on?
Under the previous administration, a review panel was convened to determine whether soldiers awarded the Medal of Honor for their actions at the Battle of Wounded Knee should keep their medals. Now, upon deliberation, that panel concluded that these brave soldiers should, in fact, rightfully keep their medals from actions in 1890. The report was concluded in October of 2024. Yet, despite this clear recommendation, former Secretary Lloyd Austin, for whatever reason, I think we know he was more interested in being politically correct than historically correct, chose not to make a final decision. Such careless inaction has allowed for their distinguished recognition to remain in limbo until now. Under my direction, we're making it clear without hesitation that the soldiers who fought in the Battle of Wounded Knee in 1890 will keep their medals. And we're making it clear that they deserve those medals. This decision is now final, and their place in our nation's history is no longer up for debate. We salute their memory, we honor their service, and we will never forget what they did.
All right. So again, they're doubling down on the massacre, because it wasn't a battle. It was a massacre of Wounded Knee. Okay? Battle, it was a fucking slaughter of civilians, you drunken moron. At least the U.S. is consistent in its support for genocide. Okay? The Wounded Knee massacre was not only a battle, but the intention was not a battle, but the intentional killing of hundreds, all right, of Lakota Sioux by U.S. soldiers in 1890. All right, now, what I did was I typed in here, what is he justifying? Because again, under the Biden administration, you know, they pity-patted at, you know, apologizing to so-called natives, you know, for what they did, you know, taking away the medals of particular, you know, men who fought in these wars where they raped, robbed, and murdered them. All right. But under the Trump administration, they're doubling down. And they don't feel sorry about their brutal history because the people they dominated weren't doing anything with the land. They were base, all right, prehistoric, dumb, okay, savages who were just drinking each other's blood, eating each other's flesh, doing sacrifices, which some of those things were happening. Don't get it twisted. Okay? Don't get it twisted. They were over here practicing some of those, you know, Assyrian, Babylonian practices that they learned and brought over here. But there was a lot that they did that was good as well, and a lot of customs and inventions that, all right, are used in today's world by Esau Edom. But as he, you know, brings out what he did to these people, the notion is always, well, these people didn't know how, they didn't have a will. They were base. They were, you know, just stupid. And, you know, so what we did to them is really justified because they're better off now on the reservation with access to, you know, alcohol and the internet. That's just how the devil operates. Now, I said, what happened at the massacre at Wounded Knee? Okay. Were any covenants broken? I said, it says the massacre at Wounded Knee, December 29, 1890, was one of the darkest and most tragic events in U.S. history, particularly in the relationship between the U.S. government and the Native Americans, all right, the tribe of Gad and so forth, right? It says, location, Wounded Knee Creek, South Dakota, okay? Who was involved? The U.S. 7th Cavalry Regiment and a band of Lakota Sioux led by Chief, all right, Spotted Elk Bigfoot. The Lakota were suffering under broken treaties, forced reservation life, starvation, and suppression of their spiritual traditions. Okay? And again, this is all due to the curses. You see that? And the scriptures tell you, all right, that a troop would overcome Gad. Okay? These people are bloodthirsty. Proverbs 29:10, the bloodthirsty hate the upright, but the just seek his soul. And that's what we're doing here. A troop would overcome Gad, right? Genesis 49:19, Gad a one, all right. A troop shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. So a troop overcame him, right? They slaughtered the buffalo, as we'll show you, which that's in the curses, right? And they broke covenants with them. This is the book of Psalms 55:20. He hath put forth his hands against such as be at peace with him. He hath broken his covenant. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were salted in oil, yet there are drawn swords. You see that? So he hath broken his covenant. Okay, so the Lakota, the Gadites that were over here were suffering under broken treaties, forced reservation life, where we steal the land and we reserve this part for you. Nothing grows, dead, ignored, starvation. Or you got children committing suicide on those reservations. And suppression of their spiritual traditions. They took their language away from them and put them in those border schools. The Ghost Dance movement, a peaceful spiritual revival promising the return of the buffalo and the fading away of white domination, was spread amongst the tribes. All right, tapping into, you know, the traditions that have nothing to do, all right, with Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Okay, but ultimately they were doing these things in hopes, as they were separated from their tradition. They were doing these things in hopes that the domination of the Edomite will go away. It says the U.S. government viewed the movement as a threat of uprising. So here it is. You do all of this wickedness to them, and they form a movement, all right, of basically spiritual dancing and, you know, saying, you know, the Lord is going to, you know, or the gods or whatever they were praising was going to return their buffalo because they slaughtered all of the buffalo. Let's get Deuteronomy 28:31. Thine ox shall be slain before thine eyes, and thou shalt not eat thereof. Thine ass shall be violently taken away from before thy face, and shall not be restored to thee. See, they were praying to these different gods or whatever to restore their sheep and to take away the enemy. It says, thy sheep shall be given unto thy enemies, and thou shalt have none to rescue them. So this is what happened to them, right? So the U.S. government looked at them, all right, doing spiritual, you know, the dances and things like that, calling on their gods or whatever to return the buffalo, okay, and to take the enemy away. They view this as a threat of uprising. The U.S. Army surrounded Spotted Elk's band, demanding they surrender their weapons. Okay? And this is similar to what's happening over here. During disarmament, a scuffle broke out, possibly when a deaf Lakota man, all right, black coyote, okay, resisted giving up his gun. Okay? The soldiers opened fire, all right, with Hotchkiss cannons. Within minutes, over 250 Lakota men, women, and children were killed, and 25 soldiers died, mostly from friendly fire. Yes, many treaties and covenants were broken between the U.S. and Lakota, all right, long before Wounded Knee. The massacre was an ultimate betrayal of those broken promises. Okay, and then it just goes into many of the broken promises that these devils, you know, and this just shows you that this man is the devil. And then you complain about it and, you know, start to, you know, come together and be like, wait, this is wrong. Then he calls you a terrorist and a savage and obliterates you. I said, was plenary power, all right, used in this massacre? Excellent question. Yes, plenary power was deeply tied to the policies and mindset that led to the massacre in Wounded Knee. Now, I forgot to bring it up. Okay. So subscribe to this elders page, GMS Fear the Most High 7 God, but plenary authority, Stephen Miller.
Thank you so much for joining us, by the way. You've called the district judge's ruling blocking the deployment of National Guard in Oregon legal insurrection. Does the administration still plan to abide by that ruling?
Well, the administration filed an appeal this morning with the Ninth Circuit. I would note the administration won an identical case in the Ninth Circuit just a few months ago with respect to the federalizing of the California National Guard. Under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the president has plenary authority,
Stephen? Stephen?
So he froze after he said it, but he knows exactly what he's doing. Okay? They all know what they're doing. So the same power that was used to wage this kind of war on the Native Americans is going to be used against, all right, American citizens, right? As they're setting the stage to label everybody who comes up against them a domestic terrorist. It's the same thing that we're reading. They're breaking all of the covenants. Everything they promised you, American citizens, is all right. Those covenants are broken. All right. And people are talking about this law, that law, the Constitution. You know, well, these devils have been breaking the Constitution. Okay. They've been committing crimes domestically all over the planet Earth that get vetoed or ignored or swept under the rug. They don't operate on the code of law. They operate under the spirit of the spiritual demon Satan. So plenary power was deeply tied to the policies and mindset that led to the massacre at Wounded Knee. Even though it wasn't formally cited as a legal doctrine at the time, let's unpack it. What is plenary power? It means full and complete authority. In this context, the U.S. government claimed absolute power over the Native American tribes. The doctrine was later legally affirmed, all right, 1886, 1903, you can look that up, the United States versus Cogma, Lone Wolf versus Hitchcock. It held that Congress had ultimate authority to make and break treaties, okay, govern reservations, and decide Native affairs even against the will of the Native Americans. Okay, and again, if they're saying they have plenary power here, okay, that means your constitutional rights can be broken. Okay? Everything that they promised you, they can use, you know, a law or a loophole to just say, well, now, you know, F that. In plain terms, Native sovereignty was nullified by U.S. claims of guardship and dependency. And as the scriptures say, let's get Psalms 94. We get this a lot as well. Psalms 94 and 20, shall the throne of iniquity have fellowship with thee, which frameth mischief by a law? They gather themselves together against the soul of the righteous, and condemn innocent blood. See, this is what they're doing, and this is what they plan on doing. 2nd Esdras 11, speaking of ancient Rome, but the revival of Rome is here. Okay, what we're reading about is a brutal history stemming from the Renaissance, where they just went throughout the four corners of the earth. After being down and out for 1,000 years, they went through the four corners of the earth, waging war, lying, using pseudoscience, poisoning. 2nd Esdras 11 and 42, for thou hast afflicted the meek, thou hast hurt the peaceable, thou hast loved liars, and hast destroyed the dwellings of them that brought forth fruit, and hast cast down the walls of such as did thee no harm. Therefore is thy wrongful dealing come up to the Most High, and thy pride unto the mighty. The highest have looked upon the proud times, and behold, they are ended, and his abominations are fulfilled. And as the scriptures say, let's get Lamentations 4. Lamentations 4 and 21, rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, that dwelleth in the land of Uz. The cup shall also pass through unto thee, and thou shalt be drunken, and shall make thyself naked. So rejoice and be glad. Okay, you Edomites, you're at the height of your pride, and we love it, because this is how you're supposed to go out. Pride goeth before destruction. See, the punishment of thine iniquity is accomplished, O daughter of Zion. He will no more carry thee away into captivity. So the humiliation of Zion is done. You can get the 2/3, right? And some of us will be martyrs, but eventually a standard is going to be lifted up once you start putting your hands on the servants of the Lord. You don't win this time. So our captivity ends, all right, as we are in the hands of Esau, Edom. Okay? The punishment of thine iniquity is accomplished, O daughter of Zion. He will no more carry thee away into captivity. He will visit thine iniquity, O daughter of Edom. He will discover thy sins. That's why the scriptures say in Revelation 18, thy sins have reached up to the heavens. You're being discussed in the heavens and prepared for a judgment. Okay? So, how plenary power connects to Wounded Knee. Although Wounded Knee happened before 1903, the spirit and practice of plenary power were already in force. Force, disarmament, and relocation. Okay, was they're doing that to the American citizens? They do that worldwide. They had to give up their weapons, all right, and confine themselves to reservations under U.S. military control. This stemmed from the belief that the federal government had total authority to dictate native movements and conduct. And this is what they're getting ready to do to the American people. Suppression of the Ghost Dance. The Ghost Dance was a spiritual movement, not a rebellion. Okay, they basically labeled you Antifa back then. Yet the U.S. Indian agents and military leaders outlawed it, okay, and arrested leaders and sent troops to enforce peace. That enforcement was justified by the assumption that the Washington had complete power to regulate, all right, native religion and expression. So you didn't have a right to have your own practices and you know, call on your God or whatever. You know, that's looked at as a threat of uprising against me. Ignoring treaty protections. Okay, this is what you Edomites did, and this is what he's doubling down on. Okay, the U.S. government broke Fort Laramie Treaty in 1868, promising protection and autonomy from the Sioux to the Sioux Nation. The U.S. government broke that treaty, then justified it by saying Congress had plenary power to alter or annul any treaty it made. All right, with or without native consent. The military enforcement and federal will. The Army's actions at Wounded Knee were the physical arm of this doctrine. Federal agents invoked authority over Indian affairs to deploy troops and disarm a peaceful camp, showing plenary power turned into plenary violence. Okay? So, in more biblical terms, you could say plenary power was the secular version of Pharaoh's hardened heart, a government exalting its will above covenant, justice, and divine law. And this is the thing, you Edomites, okay, you know, there's always going to be a nation superior over others, all right? But the way that you did it was just completely out of order and wicked and downright nasty. And we're living at a time where he's being called out about it. So they're going to these particular, you know, Smithsonian, you know, libraries, and they're trying to block the reality of these truths, and they're doubling down, okay, on what they've done.
Under the previous administration, a review panel was convened to determine whether soldiers awarded the Medal of Honor for their actions at the Battle of Wounded Knee should keep their medals. Now, upon deliberation, that panel concluded that these brave soldiers should, in fact, rightfully keep their medals from actions in 1890. The report was concluded in October of 2024. Yet, despite this clear recommendation, former Secretary Lloyd Austin, for whatever reason, I think we know he was more interested in being politically correct than historically correct, chose not to make a final decision. Such careless inaction has allowed for their distinguished recognition to remain in limbo until now. Under my direction, we're making it clear without hesitation that the soldiers who fought in the Battle of Wounded Knee in 1890 will keep their medals. And we're making it clear that they deserve those medals. This decision is now final, and their place in our nation's history is no longer up for debate. We salute their memory, we honor their service, and we will never forget what they did.
See that? So, again, the pride of thine heart have deceived thee. Obadiah, verse 3, the pride of thine heart have deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Okay. Psalms 119 and 150, they draw nigh that follow after mischief. They are far from thy law. See, the God is not in all his thoughts. Okay, I believe that's in the book of Psalms 10 and 4. The wicked through the pride of his countenance will not seek after God. In all after God. God is not at all in his thoughts. But see, he's presenting himself as this Christian nationalist. But this is what Jesus Christ was always about. Okay? And now they're blowing up these Venezuela's boats. Okay? Boats that ain't no bigger than a fishing boat that you and your uncle may go on. And saying basically they're doing it in the name of stopping drug smuggling. And they're now saying that they're going to be able to do the same thing to any American who protests against them. Let's listen to a little bit of this, and we'll close it out after a few more.
.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Nermeen Sheikh with Amy Goodman in Santa Fe.
The Washington Post is reporting U.S. Special Operations helicopters and B-52 strategic bombers have been spotted flying less than 90 miles off the coast of Venezuela. Meanwhile, President Trump's authorized the CIA to carry out lethal covert operations inside Venezuela. The U.S. is also continuing to strike what they say are suspected drug boats in the Caribbean, despite growing questions over the legality of the strikes.
Stunning development, the U.S. Admiral who commands military forces in Latin America, Alvin Halsey, is stepping down early from his post as head of U.S. Southern Command, reportedly because he had concerns about the U.S. attacking boats in the Caribbean. Halsey is the first African-American commander of SOUTHCOM. Earlier this week, President Trump was questioned by a reporter about U.S. military operations in the Caribbean.
Mr. President, on Venezuelan boats, I want to ask you, why not have the Coast Guard stop them, which it is empowered by law to do? You know, this way you can confirm who's on the boat and ensure that they're doing what you suspect.
Because we've been doing that for 30 years, and it has been totally ineffective.
So they're just blowing up these boats and putting it on the news and saying, look, we're killing, drug traffickers. All right, but by law, you're supposed to give them due process. Seize them. Seize the drugs so we can know that there's drugs. How do we know that these boats you blowing up or what you showing us is really what you showing us? But we're going to show you they plan on doing that very same thing to U.S. citizens. They don't have to prove it. Okay? It's because we said so. So they're asking you, so you got this particular admiral who's, he left. Not even a year into his, tour as an admiral. He's leaving along with other military, generals and things like that, because what Trump is doing, all right, domestically and to his own people is totally out of order. Okay? It's not in line with law.
Earlier this week, President Trump was questioned by a reporter about U.S. military operations in the Caribbean.
Mr. President, on Venezuelan boats, I want to ask you, why not have the Coast Guard stop them, which it is empowered by law to do? You know, this way you can confirm who's on the boat and ensure that they're doing what you suspect.
Because we've been doing that for 30 years, and it has been totally ineffective. They have faster boats. Some of these boats are seriously, they're world-class speedboats, but they're not faster than missiles. But we've been trying to do that for years, and so much of the drugs, 25-30%, would come in through the seas.
What's the next step in this?
So how do they get here? Okay? They're allowed over here. And we know the history of you devils and drugs coming into the United States and how you used drugs, all right, particularly on, our people. Okay? And then you formulate this war on drugs to break up families and to destroy. But we're living at a time where now those very drugs are ruining your people. Your sons and daughters are hooked on meth, teeth falling out. Okay? Look at Hunter Biden. You devils are pieces of shit. Okay? And what's in Venezuela anyway? Oil. Does the scripture say he would dip his feet in oil? Right? They have resources over there. But America has their own oil reserves. So really, this man is just not going to stop. There's always going to be a justification to wage war on somebody, and it's never going to stop. Even the so-called, war over there in forget, I had an article on it, but the war, the so-called ceasefire is now, they're back at war. They're not going to stop. Psalms 104 or 140:1, deliver me, O Lord, from the evil man, preserve me from the violent man, which imagine mischiefs in their heart. Continually are they gathered together for war. Okay? They have sharpened their tongues like a serpent. Adder's poison is under their lips. And that's these laws and legislations, loopholes that they're going to use to justify what they're doing.
War on cartels, and are you considering options? Are you considering strikes on land?
Well, I don't want to tell you exactly, but we are certainly looking at land now because we've got the sea very well under control.
We're joined.
We got the sea under control. All right, through just showing you a few boats that they're blowing up. All right, now we're getting ready to go on land. Not only domestically, not only abroad, but domestically. This man is in complete demon mode.
Now by David Cole, professor in law and public policy at the Georgetown University Law Center. He's the former national legal director at the ACLU. His new piece in the New York Review of Books about Trump's bombing of boats in the Caribbean is titled Getting Away with Murder. Welcome back to the program, David Cole. If you could just start out by responding to these attacks and lay out your argument in the New York Review of Books piece, Getting Away with Murder.
Sure. We have the power and the authority to make drug smuggling a crime. We have the power and the authority to interdict boats that are bringing drugs into this country. We have the power and the authority to try people. If they're convicted by a jury, they can then be sentenced to a period of time in prison. What we do not have authority to do, what we do not have any legal authority to do, is to just execute people from the skies without any evidence, without any trial, without any showing that they pose some sort of imminent danger to anybody. And yet that's what President Trump is doing. He's taken a metaphor, the war on drugs, and mistook it for an actual war, and is now engaged in premeditated execution of civilians. We're not at war. No one even heard of this organization in Venezuela, Tren de Aragua, until President Trump declared that they were somehow attacking us and justifying his use of military force. So we're not at war. And even if we were at war, people on these boats are civilians. They are not attacking us. And under the international rules that govern armed conflict, you cannot target civilians unless they are actually engaged in hostilities against you, unless they're actually shooting against you. That is not what's going on here. These are sitting ducks, and we are simply engaged in cold-blooded murder of individuals who may or may not be drug smugglers.
So, David Cole, you have actually Republicans as well who are condemning this, like Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul. And I want to ask, what if the situation were reversed, right? What if a foreign country was targeting U.S. ships, saying, without giving evidence that these were drug smuggling ships, and saying that their intelligence operations are now operating covertly in the United States, and there is, and at least at this point, some 27 people have been killed. What do you feel those in the United States can do to enforce the law? This is about the rule of law. It looks like Trump is imminently going to attack Venezuela. I don't know if this has diverted attention from the possibility of the release of the Epstein files, but he has so upped the ante here.
No, absolutely. And, there is a problem of drug smuggling across the Canadian border from the United States to Canada. But does that give Canada the right to start executing Americans who it believes might be engaged in smuggling drugs? Absolutely not. And if Canada did that to Americans, we would be up in arms. We would be essentially treating that as an act of war and an unprovoked act of war. So this is under domestic law, it's murder. Under international law, it's a war crime. It's great that Rand Paul is standing up against it, but we should all.
And America and Israel have constantly, broken international law. But they control it. So it's vetoed, and pretty much we need a higher power to judge these people because they're not going to stop.
We'll be standing up against it. The notion that the President of the United States can order premeditated murder of individuals who do not pose any sort of threat, who are not shooting at us, are not attacking us, is completely outrageous. And, what troubles me is that, by and large, it has barely caused a ripple. And a lot of things that Trump has done are deeply disturbing, weaponizing the Justice Department, pardoning the folks who were involved in January 6th, cutting off aid to all kinds of needy people around the world and here at home. Those are outrageous. But there's a difference when you start killing human beings without any process whatsoever. We have a death penalty in this country, but the death penalty can only be imposed, first of all, after a long and rigorous procedure to make sure that you haven't gotten the wrong person. And secondly, it can only be imposed where the defendant is convicted of murder. These individuals who have now been sent to the bottom of the sea by this president, if they were tried, at most would face a sentence of some period of years. There would be no death penalty authorized under the Constitution for these individuals, even assuming they're guilty. And yet President Trump is just taking the law into his own hands, turning a metaphor into an actual war, and now suggesting that he's going to authorize the CIA to use lethal force within Venezuela. It really just a completely outrageous action. And it's very disturbing to me that there's not more outrage within the Senate, within the House, and within the American people.
Well, David Cole, another issue, of course, that people have commented on extensively is that, first of all, Venezuela is neither the main producer nor exporter of drugs to the U.S., which has raised speculation about the motives of Trump targeting Venezuela rather than the countries who are either the biggest producers or exporters. What do you think explains that?
Yeah, no question. This is a political action by the president against Maduro, against a weak country. That he feels that he has he's a bully. He's a bully at home. He's a bully overseas. He feels that he can do this without significant pushback from Venezuela, and so he's doing it. It is not about stopping drugs from coming into this country. Drugs continue to come into this country across the border every day in much larger amounts than come on speedboats from Venezuela. This is about his flexing muscle.
This is what they do.
Acting the bully that he is. But again, it is also about him committing homicide. There is a federal felony statute that makes it a crime to engage in homicide on the high seas. And that is what is happening. The other thing I'll say about it is it's deeply concerning that the military is going along. If this recent commander of Southcom stepped down because of concerns, that's good. But what about all the other military people who are engaged in this action, which violates the most basic principles of the laws of war, which they are.
And when more start to stop, or leave, the robots will come, and they don't have emotions. This is the book of Habakkuk, chapter 1. All right. And 9, they shall come all for violence. Their faces shall sup up as the east wind, and they shall gather the captivity as the sand. And they shall scoff at kings, and princes shall be a scorn unto them. And they shall deride every stronghold, for they shall heap dust, all right, resources, and take it. Okay. Then shall his mind change, and he shall pass over and offend, imputing his power unto his God. And this is what the ancient Chaldeans did. Okay. And this is what Esau, Edom, the modern day Chaldeans are doing. All right. Be it Babylon the Great, the small hat. Okay. The EU, NATO, right? Just destroying, rape, robbing, and murder. And this is their legacy. Art thou not from everlasting, O Lord, my power, mine holy one? We shall not die. All right, the elect are going to live. O Lord, thou hast ordained them for judgment. So he ordained these Edomites to judge us. He ordained the Chaldeans to judge us. And almighty power, thou hast established them for correction. Okay. And they're getting ready to do some heavy correcting to the 2/3 of our people. Okay. It says, thou art of purer eyes than to behold evil, and cannot look on iniquity. Why then do you look upon them that deal treacherously, and that holdest thy tongue when the wicked devoured a man that is more righteous than he? Like, why are you allowing this? These are things that the prophets struggle with. And makest men as the fishes of the sea, and creeping things that have no rule over them. This is how they have treated humanity, as basically, fish waiting to be snared up. Okay, that, they take them up with the angle, the hook, sin, drugs, broken treaties. He just keeps you chasing after that hook and getting snatched up and devoured. They catch them in their net and gather them in their drag. Therefore they rejoice and are glad. They sacrifice into their net and burn incense into their drag, because by them their portion is made fat. So they worship this war. They worship waging war on people. They worship slaying the nations. Okay, they worship just doing evil. They worship waging war. As a matter of fact, what I'll do is I'll go into Bible Hub, right? And I'll go to Habakkuk chapter 1. And 15, and I'll go into, let's see what some of the scholars say. Let's go to Gill. It says, they take them up with the angle. The prophet continues the metaphor of fishing and observes the different way of taking fish, the different ways of taking fish, which is to be applied to the case he is speaking of. As fishermen, they, the Chaldeans, all right, take all they can with their angles, okay? Nebuchadnezzar and his army take up all out of the sea of the world. The sea represents the people. Are ambitious of getting all kingdoms and nations of the world under their power and dominion. This is what the modern day Chaldeans are doing, particularly all Judea and all the inhabitants of it, good and bad, without distinction, for all were fish which came to their net. This may design the artful, alluring methods they first made use to get the people into their hands by making covenants with them and drawing them into their into making of presents and paying of tribute. Okay. Let's see here. Then it goes into some history of what the king of Babylon did back then, and the king of Babylon is doing it today. Therefore, they rejoice and are glad as fishermen do when they have good sport. So these people rejoice in their own success and in the calamities of their neighbors. Okay, let's go to verse 16. It says, therefore they sacrifice unto their net and burn incense unto their drag, either to their idols, all right, to fortune and to the stars, imagining they gave them success. And this is what they're doing. They're worshiping idols and gods. They're doing all kinds of sacrifices and purpose them in the arts and prospered them in the arts and methods they used. All right, they were blessed with the sword, the Edomites, or to their arms. Nor was it unusual with heathen to worship their spears. So they worship their sword, sacrifice to them, and swear by them. All right. So when you go into, they have the cult of, I don't know if it's the cult of Nimrod. They worship the spear. They know that they're the children of Cain. They know that they're the Edomites. Okay. And by all of this destruction and raping and robbing of people, their portion is fat and their meat plenteous. That is by their angle, net, drag, their philosophies, their policies, their democracy. They throw it out into the sea of the people, and people are drawn into it and devoured. Okay? It says the art and methods they use to subdue nations, conquer kings, and bring them into subjection. All right, they enlarged their dominions, increased their riches and revenues, and had plenty of everything that was desirable for food and raiment, for pleasure and profit, or to gratify the most unbounded ambition, having everything that heart could wish. Okay, and this ultimately is what the book of Habakkuk is talking about. All right, verse 17 asks, shall they therefore empty their net and not spare continually to slay the nations? This is why in the very next vision, he's given him the understanding of the very nation he's going to raise up in that same spirit, but then judge them. And he gave understanding of how they would rule, how they would, steal lands and spoil many nations. And that's what these devils are doing today, because just as we told you that these devils would, in the process of, labeling anyone who protests them Antifa, all right, we showed you this particular anti-fascist scholar had to leave, America, all right, because ultimately they were threatening his life for a book he wrote. Now, it could be propaganda, but let's listen to what he says.
Because the far right is trying to create a boogeyman term in Antifa to equate protests with terrorism, I got caught up in the middle of this.
So you are the author, Professor Bray, of
Antifa is ultimately the new term of terrorism. So to be against fascism, to be against, they now are passing laws that they have the right to just slay. But I wanted to show you this one part as well. Let's see here. Let's just start at 11 something.
Say this likely is a fascist movement. And if we don't organize, if we don't take action in the streets, we're going to end up somewhere really bad. And for me personally, I felt like my situation was such that I had to get my family out of harm's way. But this story about me is about me, but it's not really about me. It's about attacks on academic freedom, free speech, the right to protest. We're in a really dangerous situation. And so
books against fascism and tyranny. I wanted to ask you about U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi's comments saying the administration will take the, quote, same approach to Antifa as it has to drug cartels it's bombed in the Caribbean.
You hear that? They're going to take the same action, the same way they blowing up these ships, all right, without, any, applying the law, just blowing them up and, rooting about it, is the same way that they're going to do Antifa. Okay? See if I can find that speech. If not, it's all good.
Just like we did with cartels, we're going to take the same approach, President Trump, with Antifa. Destroy the entire organization from top to bottom.
And Antifa isn't even an organization. It's not one organization. So these devils are getting ready to come with it. They're coming with it. Okay? So check this video out. That's where I got a few of these videos. The priest Ayashamath standing on his watch. GMS Kingdom Minded 144, Morning News and Prophecy. Goodbye democracy. Goodbye freedoms. Right? It's going down, man. So, all right. The Lord willing, y'all edify. I just wanted to go into that, man. But hey, we love it. All right, we love it. Shalom.